oh yeah, ooh, feel good, ooh, oh yeah, ooh, feel good. It's Friday, or it's Sunday, but that's not Friday Lights. It's Sunday. You know what? That song, if any of you guys remember, one of the greatest movies of all time is Remember the Titans, and that was a song from that movie. Hey, listen, we at Current Church, we want to be in our communities as much as possible, and it is football season. How many of you guys were at some games on Friday night? That's what I was getting at, the Friday night thing, yeah? Hey, you know what? Let me hear some pride in here. Do we have any Central fans in here right now? Anyone? Anyone Central? Do we have any Lafayette? Lafayette, yeah, Benton? All right, let's say, is St. Joe Christian in here at all?
Wow,
okay.
No.
Wait, speaking of that, do we have any 8-man football fans in here right now? Okay, we got it. Hey, I think we have some North Andrew here. Yeah, North Andrew. I think we also have Mound City, right? Yeah. Are there any other 8-man, or is any other schools I haven't named? Savannah, yeah, we got Savannah in here. Let's hear you. All right. Listen.
Hey, so I have a really funny story real quick. Can I tell a really funny story?
Absolutely.
I know this is kind of ad-lib for just a moment. But
Ben, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, what's up? I'm Ben, everybody. So I have, my mom could probably tell this story better, but like years and years ago, Mound City was playing St. Joe Christian for homecoming, and so they made a bunch of floats and signs and stuff, and one of the signs that one of the little kids made for homecoming for them against St. Joe Christian said in really big letters, kill the Christians. So there's that.
But let's not do that.
They're the Lions, so that would have made a little bit more sense. But anyway, I thought that was
Hey, we have a great service lined up for you today. We actually have a little fun thing. You guys all should have got footballs. If you got footballs, raise them up. You got footballs.
If you did not get a football, real quick, raise your hand.
Yeah.
I think we may have footballs ready. Anybody
yes, we
not
do.
Get a football?
Anyone not have a football?
I don't see any hands, so we might be good. Oh,
we have one.
Oh,
hey, hands
right
ready.
there.
Hands ready. Here they come. Over here.
Right there. We got one. Okay.
All right.
So Ryan,
listen,
you want to explain this?
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, we got football season up. How many armchair quarterbacks do we got in the house right now? Yeah, I see some armchair I'm an armchair quarterback. I was quite the armchair quarterback on Thursday night. I'll tell you that right now. Was not happy at all. So we got a little fun game for you armchair quarterbacks. Right now, all you guys are armchair quarterbacks. Ben, what we got going on here?
So you guys all have a number on your football. Hopefully you can read your number when you came in. Make sure you get your number like right now. Look very carefully at it because it's very important. This is kind of an honor system type thing that you remember your number. Because here's how this is going to work. We're going to give you, we're going to count you down here in just a second. And all of you, all at the same time, you're going to attempt to throw your football into this bin right here.
Not that bin.
All at this, not into this one, into this bin. Right here. You're going to all throw your football into here. And here's what we're going to do. We have two $25 Regal gift cards that we are giving away right now to two of you.
Yep.
And so everybody that makes it in here, we're going to draw out two footballs and then give those things away. So, sound cool? That work? Okay. So here's the thing, though. I thought, it would be really cool for us to make this bin a better receptacle. And if nobody makes it, we'll just pick two up off the floor.
Yeah.
That'll just be the deal. So in order for this bin to receive your footballs a little bit better, I thought it would be great. I went ahead and I printed off this picture of Travis Kelce.
Woo!
Because we know that he can receive the ball. But here's the problem. Just before service started, I accidentally ripped the picture. And so he's not available now.
The knee.
That's a Travis Kelce joke for you. It ripped at the knee. Go figure.
Yeah,
all right.
Man.
So instead, to make this better for you, because we want this thing to catch a lot of footballs, we got a picture of Kadarius Toney.
Yeah. Okay.
So any of you Chiefs fans, if any footballs were going to go in the bin, they aren't now.
Yeah, no.
Sorry. But anyway, okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to count you down, and I'm going to invite you to stand for just a second.
Absolutely.
This is going to be easier if you're standing.
No hitting the person in the back of the head.
And I realized that by throwing footballs this direction, a number of things could break, but that's a risk we're willing to take to have some fun. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to count you down. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go for it.
Throw it. Whoa, we got to go.
We got several.
Oh!
Look at that.
Oh, we got more.
Oh, my goodness.
Drop it in the bucket. We got anyone else?
That was 3 in a row right there.
Oh, man, we definitely got some to pick from. Everyone remember the numbers, right?
All right, here we go, Ryan. Draw
All right.
2 of those things out.
First one, we've got, who was 85? Ocho Cinco. Ocho Cinco.
Look at that.
All right.
Aaron, you want to help me out here?
Good job, good job.
Number 85 there. Oh, hey, heads up. You didn't know you were going to have footballs thrown at you.
Yeah. All right, last number, 74. Do we have 74?
Look at that. I see a hand.
74. Congratulations, congratulations.
Sweet. All right. So listen, I realize that, maybe being an actual quarterback is not quite as easy as you thought it might be. But you know what is easy? Coming to Current, being part of Current. We want to make this the most easygoing experience that you could possibly have in a theater. The most easygoing experience. Man, my voice is cracking. Did you guys hear that? And I haven't even started preaching yet. Oh boy, here we go. It's going to be a fun day. We want to make this the most easygoing experience that you've ever had at church. Every single week, we love to do that for you. And so you guys have picked a great day to join us. I just want to tell you what we're about here at Current. Our mission is to encourage, equip, and lead people to follow Jesus, because we really truly believe that following Jesus, that it'll make your life better, that it'll make your life easier, and that it'll also make you better at navigating life. And so glad that you guys are here for that. Something else that's really easy for you, if you're here for the very first time with us, or if you're newer with us in the last few weeks as we've been meeting together, getting this thing figured out over the last few weeks, and you've never taken this step, I want to invite you to go ahead and pull out your phone right now and go to the camera app and scan this QR code right there. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to connect with us, but more importantly, it's going to help us connect you with some people. We want to get you connected to what we're all about here at Current and help you get fully engaged in what we're all about. And so that's the best way you can do that. Just pull up that QR code there and scan that. Give us a little bit of information about you, and we'll share a lot of information about us with you. Plus, if you are new with us today, we have a gift for you on your way out. You may have received it on your way in, but we definitely want to make sure you get it on your way out if you haven't gotten it already. We have a gift for you just for hanging out with us. And the only thing that we ask in response is that you take the time for just a moment and fill out that form and just share a little bit about you. And here's the really cool thing. We actually have some nonprofit partners in this community that we love and we're partnered with. Like, we tell them, like, we love your mission. We want to further that mission as best we can. And so for every single person that goes to that QR code and shares their information with us, we make a monetary donation to one of 3 nonprofit partners, and you get to pick which one. Mm-hmm. You get to pick which one of the 3. Like, we'll send you an email, I'll tell you about our 3 nonprofit partners, and you go, I want you to donate on my behalf to this one. So we'll do that for you. So love having you guys here. So glad that you're here if you're new with us today. It's going to be a great day. In fact, I'm going to turn things back over to Ryan here, and he's going to explain what the day looks like.
Yeah. So, hey, we have a great service lined up for you guys today. I'm so excited to see all you guys here. Ben, who you just met here, he's going to actually be bringing us a message today called Heaven. Who goes there? Are you going? I'm going. Why don't we talk about it a little bit? So we're going to be talking about that message today. But first, we're going to sing a few songs. Ben, Melody, and Riley, we're going to sing some songs here. If you guys will go ahead and stand up. And I got a really important thing I need for you guys. This is on behalf of the Chiefs. What I need you to do, I need you to look to your neighbor and ask them if they can catch a football. And please report to me after service. Thank you.
My bad.
But the old tomb left empty. Your spirit now within me. Oh, what a miracle. Oh, what a miracle. Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away my sin, who died and rose again. Hallelujah. Behold the King of grace, who washed my guilt away, and he overwhelmed the grave. Hallelujah. Now shame cannot accuse me. I stood before the jury. The judge was full of mercy. Oh, what a miracle. Oh, what a miracle. Oh, behold the Lamb of God, who takes away my sin, who died and rose again. Hallelujah. Behold the King of grace, who washed my guilt away, and he overwhelmed the grave. Hallelujah. Oh, what a miracle, so unbelievable, the way that you work in my life. Once I was dead, now I'm alive. Oh, what a miracle, so unbelievable, the way that you work in my life. Once I was dead, now I'm alive. Oh, what a miracle, so unbelievable, the way that you work in my life. Once I was dead, now I'm alive. Oh, what a miracle, so unbelievable, the way that you work in my life. Once I was dead, now I'm alive. Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away my sin, who died and rose again. Hallelujah. Behold the King of grace, who washed my guilt away, and he overwhelmed the grave. Hallelujah. Oh, what a miracle, so unbelievable, the way that you work in my life. Once I was dead, now I'm alive. Oh, what a miracle, so unbelievable, the way that you work in my life. Once I was dead, now I'm alive.
Well, I hope that that has been meaningful and powerful for you as we sang it together today. I thank you for singing with us. You guys can go ahead and take your seat. We're going to jump into our message. So there's a story of a first grade Sunday school teacher. He wanted to teach his first grade students how it is. He wanted to explain to them how it is that they go to heaven. And before he decided to explain this to them, he first wanted to get kind of an understanding of what they already thought about how they go to heaven, how you go to heaven. And so he decided to ask them some questions. So he started with this one. He said, hey, first graders, if I sold my house and my car, I had a big garage sale and gave all the money to the church, would that get me into heaven? To which all the first graders responded with a resounding no. He's like, okay, well, how about this? If I cleaned the church, mowed the lawn, and kept everything neat and tidy, would that get me into heaven? To which all the first grade students are like, no. He's like, okay, I know what'll do it. I know. If I'm kind to animals and I give candy to children, like first graders, if I gave candy to first graders, would that get me into heaven? To which all the first graders responded, no. And he's like, well, then how? How is it that I get to go to heaven? And one kid stands up in the back and he shouts at the top of his lungs, you gotta be dead. So today is part 1 of 3 of a series called Heaven, Who Goes There, Besides Dead People. And so we're going to talk about that today. And here's why we're going to talk about it. Because most Americans, which includes most of us in this room, by the way, most Americans believe in a thing called heaven, or they believe in some sort of good place that's after this life. They believe in some sort of afterlife, a life after the one that we live here on earth. And here's something also interesting. Most Americans, statistically, which again includes most of you in this room, most Americans believe that they are going there. But there's a lot of mystery around it on how that works. There's a lot of questions. People have a lot of questions about it. If you were to ask most people how that happens, they can't really explain it. But in general, there's this sense that there is something beyond life here on earth, that there's some sort of heaven or there's some sort of good place. And most people assume that they are going there. And we tend to be especially confident of this here in the United States. We just have this confidence that somehow, one way or another, that it's going to work out for us to go to heaven. But like right now, with life here on earth, with things as busy as they are, with things going the way that they are for us, like I get it. Like you're busy. You got work tomorrow to think about. You got to think about raising your kids. You got to think about that meeting that's coming up. That's what's on your mind. So you're not really thinking about this heaven thing a whole lot, but somehow you seem to know, or you just know that there is such place as heaven, and most of us are confident that we're going to end up going there. And there are 2 assumptions that tend to fuel this confidence for us. The first assumption is this, that good people go to heaven. And the second assumption is, well, I'm a good person. I mean, listen, good people, they go to heaven. Bad people, let's not really talk about that. We'll just kind of push that aside, not really think about that. But in general, like, I'm a good person, but I'm too busy to think about it, to put a whole lot of thought in it beyond that right there. And so let's talk about it today. I mean, there are certainly, when it comes to this line of thinking, there are certainly some advantages to this line of thinking. I mean, first of all, the advantage is that it just feels just. Like it feels like it's fair. It just makes sense. I mean, shouldn't it be true that good people, like they should be rewarded for the good that they've done? And most of us, we feel like we know the difference between good and we know the difference between bad. At least we think we do. And interestingly, there's some version of this in every religion around the world. Think about this. Every worldwide religion has some form of good people are rewarded, bad people, well, again, we won't really think about that. But there's some version of this, right? And I mean, everybody can't be wrong, right? Here's the second advantage. The second advantage to good people go to heaven and I'm a good person. Well, guess what? You make the cut because you're a good person, right? I mean, compared to some people, you're probably amazing, right? And nobody likes to be judgmental. Nobody likes to judge other people. I get it. You're not trying to be judgy, but let's be real. When you're alone, like in your room with your thoughts and you're internally reflecting, you know that you're better than, fill in the blank. You're better than, and we won't fill in the blank out loud because they might be, right next to you right now. But you know that like you're better than them, right? I mean, you can't compare. You can't compare to some people. Some people are just amazing. They are incredible people, but you are confident, like I am still gooder, I am still better than, again, don't say it out loud because they might be sitting next to you. Listen, you're a good person. I believe that. I believe that about you. In fact, I believe that you probably are an amazing person. Here's the third advantage to this line of thinking that good people go to heaven. It supports the notion of a good God. I mean, nobody wants to have a bad God theology, right? I mean, there are some people that believe that God is not good, that God is bad, that they believe that, but nobody wants to believe that there is a bad God, that a bad God created the heavens and the earth so that he could rule poorly, right? When we think about God, we want to think about God as though he is a good God that would want good people in his good heaven, right? I mean, that just feels right, doesn't it? Shouldn't God want to populate heaven with people like you? Shouldn't God want to populate heaven with people like me? Here's another advantage. This is kind of a little bit of a backhanded one. It's kind of an odd advantage when you think about it, but it is an advantage of this line of thinking nonetheless. The fear of not going to heaven, it should actually motivate people to be good. I mean, to think that there is somebody out there or some divine being or cosmic being, for the sake of argument for just a minute, to think that there's someone out there that's keeping score of the good and the bad that you and I have done, that should be a motivating factor for people, right? Shouldn't that motivate us to behave, to be good? If there's a reward for us being good, or for us being kind to people, or for us being generous to people, or for us making sacrifices on behalf of others or serving other people, if there's a reward for that, then shouldn't that drive our behavior? Shouldn't that drive our ought tos? You guys know this. Like, there are just some things inside of you that you just know you ought to do, and some things that you know you ought not to do. Like, they just come naturally to us, or we think they do anyway. And in ourselves, we think that there's just these things as humankind. And they come naturally to you. You didn't make those things up, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. You didn't make them up. After all, if you could make those things up, wouldn't you redraw the line so that you never feel bad about anything that you do, right? But if those things that are inside of us, these ought tos, these ought not tos, if those things are divine, if they did in fact come from God or some other cosmic being, or fill in the blank, you figure that all out, shouldn't that create some sort of a pressure, a good pressure on us to be good? I mean, if there's a reward for us doing the things we ought to do even when we don't want to do them, or if there's a reward for us for not doing the things that we ought not to do even though we really want to do them, like, doesn't that drive us to be good so that one day we can go to a good place? But there's a problem with all of, this line of thinking. There's a big problem with all of it. And the biggest problem of all is the fact that people who believe that good people go to heaven and I'm a good person, typically, for the most part, haven't really thought about why they think that or why that idea exists in our culture and around the world. And I get it. Like, who has time? You don't have time to think about that. I get it, right? Who has time to sit around and think about why people go to heaven, and somebody else will do that for me. And in general, it seems as though everybody agrees on this, that this is the way it works. So everybody can't be wrong, right? But the problem is, if we look at this a little bit more closely, if we examine it a little closer, if we move past the comfort level, it's comfortable for us to think that good people go to heaven and I'm a good person. But if we move past that comfort for just a moment, we realize that this theory actually falls apart pretty quickly. And if you think that good people go to heaven, I'm a good person, if you've thought that before, I don't mean any offense as I kind of tear this apart a little bit for just a few moments. I don't mean to offend you, so please don't take any, but you'll realize that it's a little bit crazy when you think about it for real. That in reality, this line of thinking, there is an unsettling reality with all of it. If we choose to base our views on eternity on this assumption that good people go to heaven and I'm a good person. Here's one of the unsettling realities. First of all, we have no indisputable, agreed upon, divinely revealed standard. I mean, if this is true, that good people go to heaven, if that's true, then shouldn't God make it absolutely clear what good is and what bad is and what right is and what wrong is and what good is and what evil is? But we actually, if you look across generations, we have no multi-generational, no universal, worldwide accepted rules in order for us to measure our behavior of good, bad, right, wrong, good, evil. In fact, if you look throughout history, think about this. Think about the things that have been carried out throughout history that were considered at the time to be just, that were considered at the time to be moral, that were considered at the time to be good. I mean, it's crazy to think some of the things throughout history that were considered that. I mean, just 500 years ago, To people 500 years ago, the things that to them were self-evidently good, like I can determine for myself, it's not that difficult to determine what is right and wrong. The things that were self-evidently good to people, we would consider evil now, right? We would consider it terrible now, and vice versa. The things that were self-evidently good to or bad to them, we might consider good now. Here's a great example. Think about this. We were all raised, at least I hope you were, for the most part, we were all raised to believe that men and women both have equal dignity, that both have equal value in the eyes of God, that as far as humankind is concerned, men and women, we're equal, right? I mean, to us, for the most part, I would hope you go, yeah, duh, like that just makes sense. But if that's our definition of good, then I'm a little concerned because if you go back before the 20th century, I'm wondering if there are any more than 20 men in heaven before the 20th century. Because to us, think about this, to us, we can't even imagine today, like a woman being considered less than simply because of her gender, simply because she's a woman. And yet just over 100 years ago, around the world and in our own cultures, men in general considered themselves to be better than women simply because they were men and they were the superior gender. To me, I feel like that's wrong. I don't feel like that's good. I don't think that's a good line of thinking. I mean, how in the world could a good God allow that line of thinking that some people are less than simply because of how they were born? How could God allow that kind of person into heaven, right? And all you women in the room, you're probably going, yeah, you tell them, Ben. You tell them how it is. You'll get yours. Give me just a second. Think about this. Just based on simply the thought of slavery alone. Think about slavery for just a moment. If the idea that good people go to heaven is true, if that's true, then I'm concerned that before the 16th century, that there's nobody in heaven except for slaves. Because for thousands of years, worldwide, in many, many cultures, including our own culture, there was this assumption that some people were simply born to rule over other people, while other people were born to be ruled over. This was just a general belief, a general accepted belief, an assumption all around the world. To us today, we go, what could possibly be badder? You know, what could possibly be worse than treating people like property, than treating people like their livestock? I mean, if the idea that good people go to heaven is true, then who in the world is in heaven right now that was born before the 16th century? And here's what all that means. It just simply means this, that good in general, good is a moving target. Think about this. Good is a moving target in every single culture. It changes in every culture. It's a moving target across every generation. One generation is going to think one thing is good and another's not. It's a moving target in every nation. Think about this. Good is a moving target in your own life. I mean, isn't it true that there are things that bother you now that didn't bother you when you were younger? Maybe just 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Aren't there things that you said or you did back then that now you would consider to be bad things, but back then, like maybe you didn't consider them to be good, but you certainly didn't consider them to be wrong or bad? If that's true, and good is this moving target, then how in the world do we ever figure out what good actually is? I mean, we don't even have agreement across the world in different cultures. We don't even have agreement across different generations. Now, I'm going to say something here that to some of you in this room might feel a little bit controversial. If you consider yourself a church person, you're a Christian, you might find this next statement to be a little bit controversial or a little bit hard to hear. But typically the response at this point for church people or for Christians, whenever you talk about this argument, the response for us typically is, well, Ben, we have a standard. We have a standard of what is good and bad, right and wrong, good and evil. And that standard is the Bible. Here's the question, though. Have you read it? I mean, have you read all of it? I mean, there are some things in parts of the Bible that were carried out on behalf of God that were considered to be good things being carried out for the kingdom that you and I would not consider to be very good things today, right? But Ben, shouldn't the Bible be good enough to tell us whether or not we are good enough to go to heaven? If that's true, if the Bible is our standard of good, bad, right, wrong, good, evil, if that's our standard, then here's the problem. You don't make the cut. Well, Ben, I do make the cut. I mean, You don't know me that well. I get it. I don't know you that well. You don't know me. I keep the 10 Commandments. I follow the 10 Commandments. Really? Name them. I mean, most people can't. Think about this. Most people couldn't name the 10 Commandments if their eternity depended on it, and yet somehow they think that their eternity depends on it. It's okay to think that you keep the 10 Commandments as long as you don't know what they are, right? Right? And by the way, speaking of the 10 Commandments, we're going to talk about them a little bit more in part 3 of this series here in a couple of weeks. So don't miss part 3 coming up here in a couple of weeks. But the 10 Commandments, here's the thing. They come to us in the book of Exodus. And the 10 Commandments are actually, they're considered kind of the big 10, but they're actually just 10 of over 600 laws, 600 rules, specifically for the nation of Israel. But the 10 Commandments themselves, they come to us from the book of Exodus. And in the book of Exodus is part of the Old Testament, which, by the way, there is no reference in the Old Testament to heaven as far as like an afterlife is concerned. The only reference to heaven in the Old Testament is to the heavens, meaning like the sky, the universe, space. There's no correlation as you read through the law, as you read through the 10 Commandments and the other laws. There's no correlation between, hey, if you follow these things, if you keep these rules, if you follow these laws, guess what? You're going to go to heaven someday. There's no correlation there. The Old Testament has no theology about an afterlife. The only afterlife theology that the Old Testament has is about this place called Sheol. And the Jews believe like everybody goes to Sheol someday. We don't really know what it is. It's kind of weird, but everybody's going to end up there someday. So the Old Testament is actually no help for us as far as figuring out what the requirements are for heaven. Like, hey, if you keep these rules, here's the afterlife that you'll receive as a result of it. If you don't keep these rules, here's the afterlife you'll receive. And then the New Testament, interestingly, gets even more complicated when it comes to eternity. Because the New Testament, it actually talks about heaven, it talks about the afterlife more than any other ancient literature. It talks about it a lot. And yet in the New Testament, here's what it says. Hey, are you trying to find your way to heaven? Hey, are you trying to work your way to heaven? Hey, are you trying to do good so that you can earn your way to heaven? Guess what? You're doomed. You've got no shot. In fact, Paul, who often referred to himself, interestingly, as at one time in his earlier life, the goodest of the good, like the bestest of the best. He would tell people, listen, I grew up knowing this stuff. I was taught this stuff. I knew this stuff like you would not believe. And I followed every single one of the rules, every single one of the laws to the T. And then I found Jesus. Then I had an encounter with Jesus that completely changed my life. The message of Jesus begins to get through to Paul. And Paul's like, I got to get this message out to everybody. And so he writes this book called Romans. And this is what he says in that book. He says, there is no one righteous. There is no one good. Like not even one person. No one is good enough. And in case, by the way, you didn't think I was clear enough, 10 verses later, he says it again. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law, by following this set of rules, by being good. Well, Paul, I believe that if I follow all the rules perfectly, if I follow them to a T and I keep them all, I obey all the laws for my entire life, I believe that I would be good enough for heaven. Paul is like, nope. In fact, he triples down on it. A few verses later, he says something that maybe you're familiar with. Maybe you've heard this before. He said, everybody, all have sinned. Every single one of us falls short of God's standard. Every single one of us falls short of God's glory, of his presence in our lives. So in other words, the Bible doesn't actually provide for us a standard of conduct so that we can earn a ticket into heaven someday, even though it talks about heaven a lot. Now, to this point, I'm not trying to argue with you whether or not the Bible is correct when it comes to its teaching on heaven. At this point, I'm just trying to tell you what the Bible says. And what the Bible does not say is this, that there is a checklist that you can do in order to be made right with God and so that you can go to heaven. And if you think it does, if you think that there's like a set of rules or a set of like, this is good, this is bad behavior, if you do these things, that will earn you your way to heaven. If you think that's the case, well, I hope today that actually this series helps today and throughout the next few weeks. So again, the first unsettling reality is this: we have no established standard. Here's the second unsettling reality. We don't know what percentage of our actions have to be good to make the cut. I mean, is it like a test? Like in school, when you were in school, is it like you have to get a 60% or better so that you don't get an F, you don't get a fail? Or maybe it's 70%, you know? What if it's just 50%? Like you just have to have like more good than bad to get into heaven. And again, just to be clear, first of all, we don't actually know the definition of good. We can't really define what is good because we know that that's a moving target. And second of all, does God actually consider your environment? Does he consider the way you were brought up? The people that raised you? Your experience with church or not church? I mean, if that's the case, like for me, I grew up a church kid. I've been in church my entire life. I've been taught the Bible from my youngest of age. Like I was taught the Bible so much that I would go to church and we would study the Bible in something called Bible quiz. We would study the Bible for hours so that we could then go compete against other kids who had studied the Bible for hours to determine who knew the Bible better. So I got like a lot of scripture inside this head up here. I know it pretty well. Does that mean that like God's going to hold me to a higher standard, a higher accountability? Like I got to get 80, 90%? And what about people? Like what about other people who have no church experience? What about people who have no upbringing that taught them the difference between good and bad, right and wrong? I mean, to which you might respond to that, well, I mean, if I was God, then yeah, I would take that into consideration. Well, guess what? You're not, and neither am I. And here's the third problem. At what point, when it comes to that percentage, at what point do our good actions actually count? Is it when we're 5? Is it when we become an adult at 18? If there's a point where they start to count and they don't count and the percentage is, you know, working in my favor or against my favor, well, then I hope it hasn't started yet because, man, like, you know, I got some good to be doing, right? And shouldn't all of it be clear? Your eternity depends on it. Shouldn't that be clear for us? Here's another problem. Here's another unsettling reality. We don't know if thoughts and motives count against us. I mean, is it just the things that you actually do, or is it the things that you thought about doing and thought about doing again and did put a lot of thought into it, but maybe you never actually worked, you never actually did it? Or what about your motives? Like what if you intended to do good, but that good thing ended up becoming, it ended up going poorly or going bad? Does the reason why you did that thing in the first place, does that matter? Does God take that into consideration? Here's another problem. We could already be out of time. Think about this. Like, you might have already done so many bad things that there is not enough time left in your life. You don't know how much time you have left. There might not be enough time for you to make up for all the bad things you've done with the good things. And again, just because I want to make this clear, like we don't actually have a standard to know where our account balance lies as far as good and bad. To which you might respond, well, Ben, no. I know for a fact that my good outweighs my bad. I know my good outweighs my bad. According to who? According to you. I mean, it's pretty easy for your good to outweigh your bad when you get to decide the scale, right? What if God decides the scale? And what if there's some things on that scale that God decides that, like, some of those things are so bad that if you do these things, like, you're automatically out. Like, you got no shot. It doesn't matter how much time you have left, how much good you do, you've got no shot. What if you're already out of time? What if you're already doomed and you have no idea? If that's the case, then guess what? You're being good for nothing. You're doing good things. You're being good, hoping that God notices. Hey, God, do you notice these good things that I'm doing over here? You see how I'm, I hope that all this good stuff I'm doing is distracting you from all that bad stuff I've done. I'm hoping it helps you forget the bad things. And I realize, like with all of this, you might be saying to yourself, Ben, like, this is crazy. You're kind of oversimplifying this a little bit, right? Yeah, I am. But this is why this theory that good people go to heaven is just not realistic. Here's another problem. If good people go to heaven, that means that you could miss heaven by one good deed. I mean, there's got to be a cutoff, right? I mean, not everybody can go to heaven. Bad people got to go somewhere, right? People that are bad, there's got to be some sort of cutoff between good and bad. I mean, can you imagine getting to heaven one day and you're standing before God and he pulls out some sort of ledger and he's like, you were close. You were so close. All right, see you later. Off with you, right? Can you imagine? I know it's silly, but think about this. You're standing before God and he's like, you remember the other day, like just before you passed, you remember how you got in that argument with that referee and you used some words and you used some language maybe you shouldn't have used? Guess what? That did it. I mean, that was the thing. Sorry. See you later. Again, I mean, we don't really know the standard, but can you imagine missing it by one good deed? And here's the biggest problem. This is the biggest problem of them all. If good people go to heaven, and if a divine being, if God gets to decide who's in and who's out, but he never really explained, this is what you must do to go to heaven, and this is what you must not do to go to heaven. He never fully explained what is good, never fully explained what percentage of your actions have to be good, never fully explained, whether or not your thoughts and motives count, never fully explained how much time you have to get it right, but just left it to all of us to figure that out. And yet your eternity forever in one place or the other depends on that, all of it. Then here's what that means. It means God is not good. I mean, think about this. What do you call a teacher who doesn't give you any notes, doesn't give you any lectures to explain it, doesn't give you any material to study, and then one day you come to class and you discover, hey, we're having our final exam today, but they didn't tell you that ahead of time? You would not call that teacher good. What would you call a boss who says, hey, tomorrow morning I want you to meet with me in my office. I'm going to give you a performance review for how well of a job you've been doing. Now, I realize I never gave you a job description. I realize that I never told you what the expectations for, like, with your job since you've started. You have no idea. Like, what would you call that boss? Well, you might actually say, well, Ben, that you just described my boss. Hopefully not. But if that is your boss, you would not call that a good boss, right? If you decided you wanted to run a 5K, you decided, I'm going to sign up for a 5K. What would you call the race officials who don't decide ahead of time, like they don't go out and they mark out the path of this 5K in advance? You have no idea what the path is. They haven't made it clear. There's no signage. There's nothing. They don't actually decide what the official length of this race even is. I mean, for all they know, it could be a marathon because they didn't actually mark out the path. And then after the gun goes off and people run in all kinds of different directions, then they decide where the finish line is after the race has started. What would you call that? You wouldn't call it good. You wouldn't call it just. You wouldn't call it fair. But if good people go to heaven, then that is our situation. If good people go to heaven, then as it stands, God is not good, or he's not fair, or he's not just, at least not by our standard, not by our measurement. And what if God has a different standard? What if he has a different measurement? What if he has a different view of what is good and just and fair? And he never actually revealed to us what that is. And here's my point with all of that. All we have to do is take a couple of minutes to examine this closely, and that whole theory falls apart. Think about this. We are being good, if that's what we believe, we are being good in order to be with a good God who never actually defined what good is or what good enough is. I mean, if in fact God is good, then shouldn't he come to us like every 20 years at a minimum, maybe every other year, maybe every year, just to give us an updated version of what this is what good behavior is, this is what bad behavior is? Shouldn't he keep coming over and over again? I mean, we would need good enough 2023.0, right? Because our culture is constantly changing. Think about this. There are more opportunities for you to do good and for you to do bad today through the innovation of technology and just our different culture and everything than there were 20 years ago. If you could actually work your way to heaven, wouldn't you need some updates on what is good and bad in 2023? I mean, we got to figure this out. Because what do we say at people's funerals if this is all true? What do we say when people pass? I mean, well, he was a good man. He did some really good things. I mean, he was good enough for us. I really hope that he was good enough for heaven. Now, let's pray to the God who makes us guess. I mean, what do we say to kids? What do we say to kids when we lose somebody? What do people say to kids who don't believe any of this, who or maybe believe that good people go to heaven? What do they say to their kids? I'm a little curious, so I looked it up. There's an article written by somebody called Erica Komisar, and this is what she says. She says, I'm often asked by parents, how do I talk to my child about death if I don't believe in God or heaven? Which, by the way, the author of this article, she doesn't. She says this, my answer is always the same. Lie. Why? Well, because the idea that you simply die and turn to dust may work for some adults. Notice she says some, not many, not most. It may work for some adults, but it doesn't help children. Belief in heaven helps children grapple with this tremendous and incomprehensible loss. So we lie about it? So we just make it up because we don't really know? So we teach kids that they have to mourn the loss of somebody by lying to them or mourn with lies or just, say, I don't know, instead of giving them hope. Now, I realize that to this point, you may be thinking to yourself, you may be processing, I hope you're processing this with me. I hope maybe even to a degree you're arguing with me a little bit over this. Because I hope that you're thinking about this with me as I go through it. And I hope that as a response to all of that, your question is, Ben, so what do we do? Well, don't miss part 2. Listen, sometimes I kind of like to leave things a little bit incomplete when it comes to the messages. Sometimes I like to leave things feeling a little bit unresolved. You Christian people out there, you church people out there, you hate that. You're like, Ben, give us the answers. We want the answers. Tell us what to do. And I get that. But I'll just be honest with you. I like to leave things a little open-ended when it comes to messages because I want to give you something to think about all week long. I want to give you something that you go home and you wrestle with and you ask this question over and over and over, like, what do we do with this? What do we do with this? What do we do with this? Because I want you to come back the following week wanting the answer to that. So sometimes I like to leave things open-ended. So Ben, what do we do? Well, for starters, try not to die this week. All right, let's pray, and I'm going to dismiss you. Let's go. No, instead, I want to end this way. This is what I want to do instead. I want to tell you something. And for a moment, I don't want you to argue it with me. I just want you to hear what was said, okay? If we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus did not teach that good people go to heaven. In fact, to a degree, Jesus taught that good people don't necessarily go to heaven. In fact, Jesus taught the opposite of what most of us naturally think or what most of us were raised to believe. Jesus taught that good people don't necessarily go to heaven, and yet he still taught his followers, he still taught them to be good, and he still taught them to do good. He told them to be good and to do good for each other, for those in their community, but also to be good and do good to their enemies, like people that they couldn't even stand and couldn't stand them. In other words, Jesus really believed that we can, in fact, be good, and we can, in fact, recognize the difference between good and evil when it comes to our interactions with other people. Even like he recognized that we can be good when it comes to our interactions with people that aren't necessarily good to us. In fact, at one point, Jesus taught us, he told us that we should be perfect, that we should be good, be perfect like our heavenly Father, but not so that we can go to heaven. So Jesus doesn't actually have any stories. He didn't actually teach any sort of list like you do these things, you don't do these things, and you'll stay in the black when it comes to your relationship with God. In fact, he taught the opposite, that you can't. And yet, he still taught us that we should be good to each other. He just never said, hey, if you're good enough, you'll go to heaven. So if you want to believe this theory that good people go to heaven, then here's the problem. You have to remove Jesus entirely from that line of thinking. You have to remove Jesus from that theology. The very Jesus who, by the way, at the end of his story, at the end of his life, some quote unquote, culturally speaking, good people, the people that were the best of the best and followed all the rules, some religious people, they teamed up with some quote unquote, culturally speaking, everybody considered them to be very bad people, the Romans. They worked together, conspired together to kill Jesus. And while Jesus was hanging on a cross, he said to a quote unquote, culturally speaking, very bad person, somebody that the community would have considered to be a terrible person, a criminal, he said to that person, I will see you in heaven today. What? I'll see you in paradise today. I mean, here's the reality. If Jesus is who his disciples claim that he is, that is fantastic news for you and for me. It means you don't have to lie to your kids. You don't have to lie to your grandkids. You can go to a funeral and you can mourn the loss of somebody. You can grieve the loss of somebody for days, weeks, months, years. But you can do it having hope for the future. Some funerals that you go to, like, there's no hope. Because here's the problem. If good people go to heaven and we don't actually have an idea of the system for how that works, then we don't actually have any hope. But Jesus followers, they told us you can, in fact, have hope because of what Jesus taught. Again, if Jesus was right, and when he said these words, that God so loved the world, that he showed up, and he didn't have to keep showing up, and he didn't have to give us updates. He showed up one time. And when people asked him, how do we get to heaven? Jesus, how do we get to heaven? He told them the way when he was asked. And I wish you could understand his response when he was asked how to get to heaven. I wish you could understand how blasphemous this would have been to them. I mean, it sounds crazy to us now, but think about how crazy it would have been to them. He said, you want to know how to get to heaven? It's me. I'm the way. Instead of giving us a list, Jesus sent himself. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever behaves, that whoever does more good than bad? No. This is why you can't keep the teaching of Jesus in with your good people go to heaven theology. That whoever believes in him shall not be lost to God. Shall not lose out on God. Regardless of the bad things that you've done, regardless of the bad things that you do, regardless of the good things that you haven't done, regardless of your thoughts, whether they count against you, the percentage of good and bad you got going on in your life, regardless of how much time you have left, you shall not be lost to God, but instead have eternal life. Something that was never referenced when it came to the Old Testament rules and laws regarding, in that context. Something that was never referenced, that you do these things, you'll get that right there. Now, this comes to us from the disciple John, who was a good friend of Jesus. He spent 3.5 years in close relationship with Jesus and the other disciples. And eventually, when Jesus ascended into heaven, John was asked to take care of Jesus' mother, Mary, and he cared for Jesus' mother for the rest of her life. Can you imagine, taking care of the mother of Jesus himself? What was Jesus like when he was a teenager? What was he like when he was a kid? Just tell me all about it. John knew the story. And if John was here today, this is what he would say to you and to me. He said, listen, every single one of us, all these guys that hung out with Jesus, we all thought if we just keep the law, if we obey the law, then, someday we're all going to go to Sheol. We didn't really know what it was. We don't really know about it, but we knew that someday there was this judgment that was coming, and we just really, really hoped, that we made it, but we didn't really have any confidence in that. We were just doing the best that we could to do all the good things. And then Jesus came onto the scene. Jesus came into our lives, and he was completely different. And if Jesus is in fact correct, then God is not trying to catch you doing wrong things in order to condemn you. He said this, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world. He didn't send his Son into the world to catch you doing wrong, but to save the world. He didn't come to save the world through good enough 2023.0. He came to do it through him. It means he only had to come one time. And he didn't give us a to-do list. He gave us a who list. Him, Jesus. And he invites all of us to place our trust, to place our belief, to place our confidence in him. And despite whatever your standard is of right and wrong, despite whatever your history is of right and wrong, despite whatever percentage you currently have, despite whether your thoughts and motives count against you or don't, despite how much time you have left, despite all the bad things that you've done, it was all paid for through the death of Jesus on the cross, and it was all removed from your ledger. It doesn't even exist anymore. When you put your belief, when you put your faith, you put your trust and confidence in Jesus. So guess what? You don't have to lay awake at night wondering, hoping that you've done enough good to get to heaven. Because the truth is, it had nothing to do with anything you've done or haven't done to begin with. has everything to do with putting your faith, your trust, your confidence in Jesus, choosing to follow him with your life. So, what do we do? Well, I'll tell you next week. Don't miss part 2 of Heaven. Who goes there? Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for coming to this world. Not to give us a list of things that we can do, good, bad, right, wrong, but to come into this world as yourself to pay for all the wrong we've done. And God, I pray for the person or the people that are in this room that maybe they've got this today, they've understood this today truly for the very first time. It's starting to become real to them. God, I pray that you would help this to become even more real throughout this week as they wrestle with it, as they just think about it and ask these questions this week. If they're getting it for the first time, I know it's not me, it's not the music, it's not the lights, it's not the sound, it's just you. It is a genuinely good God who wanted the best for me and for everybody in this room, that invites us to put our faith, our trust, our confidence in you and follow you. So I pray that people would do that today. I pray that people would make that decision to follow you with their lives today. And then I pray that they would hang on to you with everything that they've got for the rest of their lives, that they would hang on to what you've done for every single one of us. And I pray that as we sing this last song together, I pray that the words that, like, I didn't earn this. I don't deserve this. There's nothing I've done to earn it. You gave it to me anyway. You gave yourself away to me anyway. I pray that it would just be real to us. We love you, Jesus. Pray it all in your name. Amen. I want to invite you to stand. We're going to sing one last song together to close.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, yeah. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind. Still you give yourself away. after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Come on, sing that again. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. These the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Thank you, Jesus. Hey, wow, that was a good service. I want to thank you guys for coming out today and spending some time here with us here at Current Church. This is kind of our launch pad. This is our restart service here at the Hollywood Theaters in St. Joseph, Missouri. And we'll be here every single week, right here, 10 o'clock a.m. We hope to see you guys. If this is your first time or you kind of want to talk to us, we'll be out in the hallway here. We'd love to talk to you. If this is your first time, we want to give you that gift. And man, I got some stuff I'm going to be chewing on this week, Ben. Thank you. So you guys are dismissed. It's great to see you guys this week.